Hello, welcome back to another episode of From Prison to the Streets. I'm Eric. I did 11 years in prison and I talk about prison stuff. In this episode, I'm going to continue my story. You guys said that you were pretty interested in my story, and so I'm going to keep telling it. So be sure to like and subscribe, and here we go. Where I left off when I was telling my story, I was leaving Ellsworth. I had been thrown in the hole. I got into it with an officer, and I was looking at going to El Dorado. They were going to make me max custody, and they didn't have any max in Ellsworth, so off to El Dorado I went. Now, something happened when I was in the hole in Ellsworth. There was this guy named Bush. Um, he was a blood, and he and I had done some business in the past with tobacco, and my cellie owed him some money, and my cellie got transferred out. My cellie did him dirty. He got shipped out, went to court, and he had gotten some tobacco from Bush, knowing that he was going to court and wasn't ever going to pay him back. After he left, Bush tried to approach me. This was before I went to the hole, about getting that money, and I told him he was beat. That was my cellie's debt, not mine, and it was dead after that. A couple months went by after that before I went to the hole. Now, one night, Bush flipped out on his cellie. His cellie was an old gay chomo dude, and he was whacking off in the cell while Bush was in the cell. Bush flipped out, hit the button, told the cops to come get him out of the cell before he whooped him. So they ended up putting that old black dude in the hole on protective custody. And I remember him coming into the hole, and I remember him talking to people about what had happened and why he was there. Now, usually on protective custody, there's several different things that could happen. But what usually happens is they will ship out the instigator, and then they'll let the person who's in PC out of the hole. Well, before I knew what happened, I was on my way out. I got transferred to El Dorado. And if you're interested in what a transfer is like, you should see my video on prison transports. I'll put a thing up somewhere. So, I got to El Dorado, and they did not have a place for me over on the max side. They were full. So they made me high medium by exception. I was hanging out in A&D for a while they figured out what they were going to do with me. They made me high medium by exception, and they moved me in with a guy over in East A cell house. And the guy they moved me in with was old and weird, and he wouldn't tell me what he was in there for, which is automatically a red flag when you're in prison. And yeah, I had a string of bad cellies when I first got there, but this guy's name was Rusty, and I first got there and I was pretty depressed because I kind of liked Ellsworth, and here I messed everything up, and because I had a tobacco DR, I lost visits with my family and everything, and I was told I wouldn't be able to get them back for a year, so I was pretty upset. I wasn't going out much, I wasn't doing much. I would go to chow every once in a while, but I wasn't really socializing with people. Well, Rusty was a strange character, and we had a problem one day. I got up late in the day because I was on a lot of antipsychotic medication. I was on Remeron, and I got out of bed, walked over to the toilet, and I was taking a piss, and I looked over in the mirror, and behind me, this dude is on his bunk, and he has pillows under him, and he's got himself propped up on these pillows with his pants pulled down, and he's looking over his shoulder like this. Now, I don't hate on people for their lifestyle, right? But there's a way to be respectful of others and stuff like that, and that is not how to be respectful of others. It kind of set me off when he did that. I looked straight, and no, I'm still half asleep. I just woke up, and I said, Rusty, I'm going to pretend that I didn't see that. But I swear to God, if you ever do some shit like that when I'm in the cell again, there's a good chance you're going to die in this cell. And then I got back up on my bunk and went back to bed. Well, the next day, Rusty went and hollered at the unit team and said that I needed to move, and then they moved me in with Wayne. And I mentioned Wayne in another video. I'll put a link either in the description or I'll put a thing up and you can check that out. Wayne wasn't a good cellie, so I didn't live with him very long, but while I lived with him, I started socializing with other people at the facility. I made a few friends. But I ended up moving in with a guy named Tony Hunt. And Tony was a guy that I really liked. He had a messed up crime. He didn't deserve to be in prison, in my opinion. He was involved in the drug game, and some guys gave him some drugs to sell, and he couldn't sell them. So they wanted Tony to pay for it, and he couldn't pay for it. And, he couldn't pay for it, so they were going to execute him. Well, the guy that they were going to execute him was about to take Tony out and shoot him, and Tony shot him first. And so, Tony's been fighting to get out for a long time. This was back in 1998 when he caught his case. He's a good guy. He doesn't belong in prison, and it's really sad, They were going to kill him, and he had tried to go to law enforcement, and they weren't willing to meet with him until later on. Well, this dude was about to kill him right then. He couldn't wait till later on. And so, Tony shot him. And Tony shot him before the guy had a chance to shoot Tony. Anyway, I really liked Tony. Tony had a private industry job, meaning that he was making minimum wage, which in prison is a really good thing. And, he had food, he had his TV, he had everything, and I didn't have much of anything, but he shared with me and stuff, which was cool. He was into boxing. He, was a pretty well-trained boxer, and we made some mitts out of these cheap shower shoes and socks. And so we would run combinations on the mitts and stuff. It was a really good workout, and we got along great. I was also working out every day. I went out to yard in the morning, and I worked out with a guy named Lewis. I forget his first name. But Lewis was a really cool guy. He was an older black dude. He was probably in his 40s when I met him, and he was doing 16 years. I forget what he was doing time on, but he was a really nice guy and strong. I don't know how much that guy weighed, but he was probably pretty close to 300 pounds. And when we worked out, he did chest every day, and the dude was crazy built. He wasn't ripped, but the dude was muscled as muscled gets. We had a weight machine out on the yard. Most of the, weights in prison are all machine weights. But we had a bench press machine out on the yard, and that machine had 25 pound plates on it. And he would rep the whole stack, which was crazy to me. And I remember he would always get up after doing a set and he'd be like, "Oh man, I felt that one, Eric." And I'm like, "Yeah, no shit." I don't know how much weight that is. 25 by 25, 625? I don't know. You let me know because my math isn't that great. And I don't know how much weight it actually was because, weight machines have leverage and stuff like that that kind of decreases the amount of weight that you're actually lifting. But it was a lot of weight. Now, another situation arose. You remember I mentioned Bush. Bush was a blood. He was a white blood. And after I left Ellsworth, after that whole thing with Nichols and him, I guess he ended up getting shipped out to Lansing over that thing with Nichols. Well, he wanted that $50 for my cellie, so he sent word down to the Bloods in El Dorado saying that I owed him $50 and, they needed to collect on that. So a dude pushed up on me, one of the key holders for the Bloods on that yard. He pushed up on me and he said, "Hey, Bush said that you owed him this money, and, if you don't pay it, we're going to smash you." And I said, "Well, that was my cellie's debt, not mine. I'm not paying it. And you need to check your facts because Bush is just talking out his ass." And the dude said, "Yeah, whatever. We'll look into it." Now, there was another guy who was in El Dorado who had been in Ellsworth with me, and he was aware of the situation with Bush. He was friends with me. He was a good dude. His name was AB, or that's what I called him, and he was an all right guy. And he was going through the education department. Now, at this time, I had gotten enrolled in the GED program and completed it, and I was volunteering as a tutor over in the education department, which at the time they actually called it a high school diploma and not a GED. They did away with the GED program for a little while. Anyway, so I was helping AB with his educational stuff, and he and I were pretty good friends. We would talk and hang out and stuff like that. Well, from what I gather, these Bloods were fixing to smash me. They were going to try to, they were green lighting me essentially. And AB kind of stuck up for me. He said, that's not happening. That's not how it went down. And, you ain't going to mess with him. Now, he had done like 13 years, between 10 and 13 years. And he was about to go home. And, also at this time, I had just gotten a job in the infirmary. So I was working back in the infirmary as a porter. I would, clean stuff up back there, mop floors, clean tables, clean cells, and so on. So AB stuck up for me. And when he stuck up for me, the people above him basically said, well, either he's going to get smashed or you're going to take a violation. And he said, well, go ahead, violate me. I don't care. I'm getting ready to get out. And so they did. One morning at breakfast, they smashed the dude, and they grabbed his head and they smashed it into the corner of the guard tower on the way to chow. And, they messed him up bad. And they took him to the hospital for a while. And when he came back from the hospital, I actually saw him back in the infirmary, and he was looking really messed up. And I talked to him, and he gave me his mom's address and stuff. And because he was getting out, he wanted me to write him. And when he got out, I wrote a couple letters, and I never heard anything. And I found out later that he died a few days after being released because of his injuries. He had bleeding on the brain, and he ended up passing away. So within my first couple years of being in prison, I saw a very good friend of mine die over some stuff that I was involved in, and that kind of affected me. So at this time, I'm working in the infirmary, and I also started going to church. I'm not a super Christian guy. I don't agree with Christian theology very much at all. But I felt at that time that I needed to make a change in my life. I needed to switch things around, especially after I just almost, got more time over that tobacco in Ellsworth. So I started to go to church almost every day, and I was a part of a prison ministry called Kairos, which was a really cool thing. And I also started learning to play the guitar. Tony had a buddy named Freedom, and he introduced me to him, and Freedom started teaching me how to play guitar. He taught me for the span of about 1 month. I also have a video about that. And so I had a routine going. I was doing some positive things, and it was a good experience. Now, while I was working in the infirmary, I met a really cool dude named Danny. Danny was on Interstate Compact from Florida, and he had actually killed a man with his bare hands, and he was looking at life without parole. And Danny had cancer, and they told him that he had like 4 months to live, and he was real sick sometimes. He was on chemo, but when I was back there working in the infirmary, I would develop relationships with these dudes, who were on the terminal list. I would sit with them and talk with them after I had completed my work. I'd come in, I would clean the tables, clean cells, mop the floor, and I would come in at like 6 o'clock in the morning. So by noon, I already had most of my work done, and I just stayed back there waiting for somebody to make a mess or something like that so I could clean it up. But Danny was one of those guys that I got really close to back there, one of the cancer guys, and he was a good dude. He was a really good dude, a very good friend. And I could tell you some crazy stories about Danny, some of the shenanigans that happened back in the infirmary with that guy, but that's something for another video. But one time when I was working back in the infirmary, I had an incident with an officer. You know, a lot of times the guys on chemo couldn't eat all their food or anything like that. And so they would give me their tray because they couldn't eat. When you're on chemo, if you even smell something and it hits you the wrong way, you'll be vomiting. And there was a guy back there named Pryor who was really, really sick, and he had a soda, and he couldn't drink it, so he offered it to me. So I sat down with my tray, because I also ate back in the infirmary, and I had this soda, and I was drinking this soda, and this cop named Hutch came out. Hutch was a dick. I mean, he would harass you over any little thing. He came out and he said, "Well, where'd you get the soda?" And I said, "I got it from another inmate, and I'm not going to tell you who I got it from, because they can write you up in that prison. If you deal and trade in food, they can write you up for that." And I said, "I'm not going to tell you who gave it to me, but, I got it from someone." And he said, "Well, maybe I'll just write you up for dealing and trading." And I went off on him. I'm not going to lie. I went off on the dude. I said, "Look, I just got sentenced to 13 years not long ago. I just turned 18 in prison not long ago. I don't have any electronics. I don't have visits with my parents. And I don't feel like I have a lot to lose. I can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I don't give a fuck about your paperwork. If you want to threaten me with something, you better threaten me with something better than paperwork." And the unit team came back there, and she talked to me for a minute. And she left. She just said, you need to calm down, and, it'll be all right. I'll talk to him. So she talks to him, she leaves. And then we start passing out trays for dinner time. And while we're walking, he said, "You have a really bad attitude. I'm not going to write you up, but I could." And I said, "Check this out, man. Don't threaten me." And he said, "That's not a threat. That's a promise." At that point, I lost my shit. And there was a mop handle back there. I broke it. And I chased him into the control center. And, I was fixing to stab the dude with that broken mop handle. And I chased him into that control center. And he locked himself in there and wouldn't come out. He called the unit team back down there. She sat down and talked with me again. And I explained how I felt and, how I didn't want to be messed with and stuff. And granted, this is also after, I found out about AB. I was not a very happy person. And she was really good. She stood up for me, and she said, "You know what? I understand." She said, but you do have some anger problems you need to work on." And she said, "Have you taken anger management?" Which I had taken anger management. I took anger management while I was in the hole, awaiting transfer. And I said, "Yeah, I just completed anger management not long ago." And she said, "Well, maybe you need to take it again. But, I'm going to talk to him again, and, I'm going to see if you can get the night off." So she talked to him and left. A few minutes later, he cracked the door to the control center and said, "Swanson, you can go back to your cell. You can have the rest of the night off." So I said, "Cool. I'm out of there." I left. And the next day they called me to mental health, and I had to take anger management again. It was like, I don't know. It was several weeks. And so I ended up completing anger management twice. So, yeah, there's that. Anyway, I don't want this video to run on for forever. I'm going to have to break up my time in El Dorado into multiple pieces because a lot of stuff happened there. I'm going to end this here for now. Be sure to tune in next time when I continue this story. I'm Eric. This has been another episode of From Prison to the Streets. I will see you all later.